everyone, my name is Gabby and today I'm going to be bringing you my January reading wrap up. So January was a very odd month for me, mental health wise. I had some really good days and then other days where I was laying in bed and I wouldn't eat and I just felt really depressed and just felt like there was something chemically wrong with me. And I feel like people who have mental health problems, whether it be anxiety or depression or the just understand that there's days where you just feel really bogged down and really depressed and just really out of it and you really can't explain why other than just there's something wrong with you. That's how I was starting to feel at the beginning of this year. I think a lot of it was just because after the hell that I put myself through at the end of the semester with final exams and just how anxious and miserable I made myself, I was terrified to go back to school because I put so much pressure on myself to want to do better than I did last semester and to be able to work harder because I knew the teachers and I knew the curriculum and I knew what teachers were going to expect from me and what homework I would get and sort of how the whole routine would work. So I wanted to just go in so much more prepared than I was able to at the beginning of the year, first semester. And so I put so much pressure and weight on myself that I think I was just making myself completely and entirely anxious to go back to school. I was just a bit of a mess, but now that I'm starting to get back into the swing of things, I'm fine. So please don't worry about me at all. And I'm incredibly grateful that I am feeling better and that things are looking up a lot more than they were before at the beginning of this month. Reason why I mention all of this is because I was feeling a little bit off this month. I did not get to read as much as I would like, nor read as many novels that I actually enjoyed. So this was a relatively average reading month, but I still do have 5 books here to discuss with all of you, and I'm really excited to dive in and share all of my thoughts. We're just gonna jump right into my January 2018 reading wrap up. So the first book that I picked up to start off 2018 was The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. This book was absolutely fantastic and definitely one of my favorite reads so far this month and maybe even this year. This book takes place during the 1700s in Europe and we follow our main character Monty, who is known for his roguish behavior, to put it lightly. And so his parents, seeing this, decide to discipline him and give him an ultimatum. He's gonna go on tour of Europe, he gets to gallivant, he gets to have his one last ride, and he's doing all of this with very strict rules, so it's not like he's really getting to enjoy this as much as he would like. And then he comes back home and he works on taking over his father's business, and that's the end of all of his shenanigans. With all of this looming and this tension between Monty and his father, Monty goes on tour of Europe with his friend Percy, who is a really close family friend who is an African American, and his sister Felicity, who's scheming and sort of has her own plans going on because her mother wants to send her to finishing school, and that's the last thing that she could possibly want. And so the three of them end up getting involved in a heist because of some of Monty's behaviors and a stupid thing that he does, and now he's in possession of this really valuable object, and the whole story is following this heist and everything now that has come with Monty's action to steal this object. So what is it? What repercussions could he have for taking it? And how is he going to get it into the right hands, etc, etc, etc. So if you like Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, I feel like this would be the perfect book for you because it has an incredibly diverse cast of characters. It also has that very similar heist theme where it's incredibly action-packed. You're turning the pages and you want to know what happens next, and you have these really emotional relationships between characters and just really beautiful writing. This is a book that I picked up to start off my 2018 because so many people said that they loved it, and with it being one of the Owl Crate books of the month, as you can tell from the exclusive cover, I wanted to work through some of those books because a lot of them have been sitting on my shelf for several months now, this one for at least 6 months. So I figured it'd be a good time to read this book, and I'm so glad that I did because it was the one book that I really enjoyed this month because the characters were so wonderful, the diverse elements are so beautifully incorporated into the story, because with it being a historical fiction novel, it's very easy as an author or a reader to want to dismiss diverse elements because they're just not really present in the 1700s, or at least we don't think that they are. But Mackenzie Lee did a really beautiful job of establishing the fact that these diverse elements, such as ethnicity with Percy being African American, or sexuality with Monty being bisexual, and Felicity wanting to pursue medicine and be a doctor, so having that sort of feminism, all those elements were there just because because it wasn't accepted in society at the time period. A lot of times it's looked over and nobody bothers to comment on it at all. But Mackenzie Lee, just being such a wonderful historian that she is, did such a good job with putting this novel together and researching the time period and making everything feel so vivid and so real as to what would be going on in this world, while also bringing those diverse elements into the story that are so important to us now within the YA world and publishing industry. I feel like it wasn't forced at all. It was done in a way that was meant to make that commentary and show that these diverse elements are present in society, but a lot of times we tend to look them over because they weren't accepted, and I just love the way that it was so beautifully integrated, and I was really, really excited to get to see those elements within the story just so beautifully written and well incorporated. The second book within this world, The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy, comes out later this year, and they recently revealed the cover for it, and it's absolutely stunning, and I'm so excited to get to read more in this world, and I'm so glad that I finally picked this book up because of all of the wonderful people that were praising it. I'm really, really happy that I was able to have at least one really good read this month that I can look back on and say that I really, really enjoyed, and this may end up being one of my favorites of the year, especially if I end up reading The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy and I end up enjoying that one as well. So my second read of January 2018 was The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. So I have a tradition now of reading Patrick Ness books to start off my year because last year I read A Monster Calls, and now this year I'm reading The Rest of Us Just Live Here. I've been meaning to read this book for almost 3 years now. It came out in 2015, and I remember when the cover was announced, Epic Reads said that it was a glow-in-the-dark cover, and I was like, that's so cool, and then I heard the premise, and I'm like, I have to read this book, and then I just never did. And I saw it on Book Outlet, it was a few dollars, so I ordered it, and I ended up getting a signed first edition, which is really, really, really cool. So it was definitely worth the money that I spent because this was less than $5 for a signed first edition. That's nuts. So I feel like it's almost impossible to give a synopsis to what this book is about, but to give you a general idea of the premise, we follow two different groups of people. There's the normal, ordinary, mundane kids that are as normal as you and I are, and then there are the indie kids who are the ones that go on all the adventures and do all of the really exciting things and are involved in all these capers and heists and all of these like really fantastical situations, and we're following all the normal kids and their reactions to all the things that are going on in their town because of these indie kids. So the premise in itself is really interesting, but I feel like because it's so out there, it was very hard to get a grasp on the story, and I just wasn't as invested in it as I would like. And I think that's the one big thing that sort of deterred me from reading this book for almost 3 years, was because a lot of the comments that I heard about this book were like, like I liked it, but it wasn't that great type comments, and that's sort of how I'm feeling. But I wanted to pick this book up not only because it was incredibly cheap, but I wanted to be able to have my own thoughts and opinions on it rather than just listening to everyone else, even if I did in the end up agreeing with the majority of comments that I've heard about this book. But I'm glad that I got to read it. I liked some of the diverse elements that were present within the story. I believe that there's a representation of an eating disorder, and I can't talk on the representation of it and how positive it was, but I liked seeing it within the story and getting to just see this really great cast of characters, and I felt like it was well written. It was a fun read. It was a little bit odd at times, but for such a really unique concept, I think Patrick Ness did a good job with it, and I think it was worth a read. But it's hard to comment on because the story itself is just so bizarre, but I liked the message that was being sent, and I really enjoyed it, and I feel like this is a book that I just sort of needed to read in the moment that I was reading it because it really hit me in a way. But truth be told, it didn't leave a very long-lasting impact, but I'm so glad that I got to read it because it was an enjoyable novel, and after 3 years I can at least finally now say that I've read this book. So my third read of this month is the one that I probably have the most to say about, and that is A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas, the third book in a Court of Thorns and Roses series. So where do I begin with this book? Number one, this is probably the reason why I didn't get as much reading done this month as I would have liked, because this book is a freaking Bible. It's 700 pages of almost pure nothingness. Now I have to say that this book, plot-wise, is definitely a lot better than A Court of Mist and Fury. You get to the action a little bit quicker, there's more suspense, there's more things to draw you in because you're starting to get to the end of this plot line for the set of characters. That at least made it somewhat worthwhile a read, but like, truth be told, I was reading a lot of this and I was like, nothing's happening, when is something gonna happen? This book is 700 pages and I'm reading and nothing's happening and I'm just so bored. And I feel like the more that I've started to read in the YA community, just the more I've distanced myself from Sarah J. Maas and her books, and the more that they become less appealing to me. I read all of her books in my freshman year of high school, and I think I enjoyed them particularly because I was binging through them and I was just reading one after another, and I didn't have these long period of breaks in between reading her books, and I I was able to just sort of fly through them because I was binging through them. But like having this 700-page book put in front of me with like nothing going on, I couldn't do it. And I think that's the issue with her books, is that they're so long, but there's not a lot that's happening. It's just like sex scenes, and I just feel like it's so unnecessary. Because if you want to write like this really steamy romance novel, write Harlequin romance novels. Like, don't write a YA fantasy novel where you're following Fae and you have a war that's going on and you have plot and other things that are supposed to be happening if you're not going to elaborate on any of those elements at all. And I feel like her writing, it's not for me anymore, and I feel like it just turned into something that I'm particularly not interested in. And I met Sarah J Maas once and I love her and she's incredibly sweet, but I just feel like her books are starting to not be for me. And really, truth be told, looking at a lot of her novels, I feel like it's like she's trying to be Cassie Clare, but she's not doing a good job at it, because what you're seeing is like the world of Throne of Glass is being extended and this world is being extended and there's more and more novels that are being added to the universe. That's sort of what you see with the Shadowhunter Chronicles, but Cassie does a good job at making you as a reader want to be continually invested in the world and what is going on, and her writing is just really, really phenomenal. Whereas with Sarah J Maas, I feel like she's dragging out all of her books, but she's giving nothing to the reader to want to make them keep reading, because there's just these really, really long novels with not a lot that's happening, and there's nothing to want to draw you in. So as a reader, you're just like, why does this series keep going on and on and on forever if there's no reason for me to read? And these 700-page novels aren't page turners at all. And the sex scenes, I feel like for me are personally, just because I'm like not a big fan of sex scenes, especially the way that they're written in this book, they're just really unnecessary because they're 10 whole pages long and it's just really romanticized and really ridiculous. And those 10 pages that you're using to write a sex scene that's incredibly just, ugh, you could be using to develop on the plot and the characters and just do more within the world and this civil war and things that are building. And I mean, there was an improvement that was made there, but just for me, there were so many elements about this book where I was just so frustrated. And I did enjoy elements of it as we started to get towards the end and we finally started to pick up and there were things that were going down, and I did enjoy like the last 100 pages or so, but it had to take me that long to get to that point. That's an issue, because if you're gonna write this big behemoth of a novel, you need to be able to do something with it. And that's something that Cassie's really good at, because like those 700 pages of like Lady Midnight or Lord of Shadows go by so quickly because there's so much going on and you're so continually invested, because every single situation that's happening is plot based and has something to do with that big picture as you start to get towards the end. And that's like not the case here. Like, you could cut so much of this book and be able to have a story that's so much more exciting because you have just plot based things going on and not all this extra filler stuff. You're like in the third book in the series, it should be continual action, and it's not. Truth be told, I really wasn't happy with this book, and I don't know why I read it other than the fact that I just wanted to finish out the world so I could say that I finished it out. And I don't know whether I'm gonna want to finish out the world of Throne of Glass, because I just genuinely feel like there's a lot more books that I could be reading that would be more entertaining and enjoyable to me. And this is nothing against Sarah J Maas or her books at all, but I'm just noticing BookTube in general is distancing themselves from her and her writing, because there's so many better authors out there that are writing titles that are just captivating to us, and a lot of us are just sort of done with this world and the characters and the story, and we're just kind of getting bored with it. So it's not like I feel like I'm the only one that has these opinions and sentiments, which makes me feel a little bit better about expressing them. I wanted to pick this book up just to finish the world, just to say that I could be done, because I don't like to start series and not finish them. I'm glad that I can say that at least I was done, that I got to see this plotline wrap up for all the characters, but really, truth be told, this was probably one of my least favorite books that I've read in a pretty decent period of time, and I'm disappointed that I've lost interest in Sarah's writing, because I did enjoy her books once, but now just with the new direction that they've taken, I'm not too happy with them. So my next read of this month was Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. So I reviewed this book for Teen Reads, and if you want to read my review, it is live, so I will have it linked down below if you want to hear all my thoughts and opinions on this book. And that review is incredibly long. I had so many things to comment on in this book, and as you can tell, I marked it with sticky notes or page flags that I actually got from Owl Crate a while ago, because I wanted to be able to have certain elements that I wanted to mention within my review, and I really never page flag books just because I don't find it particularly necessary. But with this book, there were so many things that I wanted to highlight, because a lot of it deals with asexuality, and reading this, like, there was so many things where I was like vigorously nodding my head in agreement, and I was just like, yes, someone who gets it, and I loved it. The only other novel that I've read that really strongly focuses on asexuality was Tosh Hurts Tolstoy by Catherine Ormsby, and I really, really loved that book, but I think the issue with it is that it doesn't really dive into asexuality that much. It's there, but I felt like I was just getting a lot more more of an understanding of asexuality from this book because there were so many wonderful quotes that I felt just depicted everything that I knew about asexuality as someone who's sort of going through and figuring out where I stand in myself and sort of feels like I could possibly be asexual. I really don't know. Obviously, like, I'm allowed to have my own journey and sort of figure things out. I liked getting to read this book because it just helped me so much to understand asexuality a little bit better, and the characters were really fun. It's just a really, really cute contemporary, and if you want to find out more about it, my review for Teen Reads is linked down below, and I go into full detail with everything there, so if you want to find out more about the story and all the elements that I really loved about this book, it probably would be best to check out that review. And so my final read of January was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So this was the first book that I read to start off my new semester in AP Lang, and I really, for the most part, was surprised that I enjoyed this book. It wasn't, of course, one of my favorites of this month. Definitely that would go to The Gentleman's Guide and Let's Talk About Love, which were both fantastic novels. This was one that I was a little bit nervous about when I found out that I was going to be reading it at the beginning of the school year. It was actually really good in terms of the writing because for me it felt like the perfect level of intensity. It wasn't too difficult and it wasn't too easy either, and I felt like I was really interested in the characters and the story and what was going on, and I thought like the message that was being sent was incredibly compelling. And the big thing that I was thinking about going into this book was comparing everything that's written in this novel to the pop culture Frankenstein that we see, and they're two completely and entirely different entities. So if you're going into this book expecting like a green Frankenstein monster, like the whole zombie type thing, it's not there. It's not in the slightest. So it really made me wonder where that pop culture Frankenstein came from, because there's really no traces of that entity in this book at all. It just really caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting it at all. But I love this book and how it deals with science, and like if you try to be God, like doesn't always work out for you in the end, because there's only one God and one creator of all beings, and you as a human are not it. Don't make life and don't pursue something too deeply and try to be above what you are, because it's not gonna work out for you. And I mean, it's Frankenstein. It's one of those really, really, really classic stories, and getting to read it was something that I enjoyed personally because I'm not a big like movie monster fan. Like that's something that for so much of my childhood I just hated and despised because I'm not a scary movie person at all. And so going into this book, I was not thrilled about reading it at all. But the more that I read it, the more that I started to enjoy it and be invested in the characters and the story and what it was that was going on. It was fun because to wrap up reading this novel, we got to hold a trial where we had the plaintiff, which was the being, and then the defendant, which was Frankenstein, and we basically went through this whole court case to sort of answer the question as to like the relationship that happens between these two characters and some of the agreements and things that come between them and what really happened, and seeing both sides of the argument and being able to weigh and like pick a side. And it was really interesting and a really great way to sort of wrap up everything that happened within this novel and everything that you read and the entire discussion that we had. And it was just a really interesting read, and I was really compelled by it. It just made me rethink everything that I knew about that pop culture Frankenstein and completely turn it on its head. So I'm glad that I got the opportunity to read this novel because it definitely changed my opinion from the way that I look at the pop culture Frankenstein, and I have a lot more appreciation for this novel than I would have ever previously had. So that's about it for my January reading wrap up. Truth be told, it really wasn't that bad of a reading month looking through a lot of my books. I just think that after so furiously hating A Court of Wings and Ruin and like that taking up so much of my month, a lot of the other books that I read I sort of just felt down upon. It wasn't too bad. Like The Gentleman's Guide and Let's Talk About Love and Frankenstein I enjoyed. So maybe it wasn't my best reading months ever, but I did get to read a few books that at least I'll keep with me, which is good. If you're having a relatively similar reading month as me and you want to talk about maybe like why you've been feeling slumpy, let me know. If there's a book you really, really loved that you read to start off your year, let me know, because of course I could always use some recommendations. Thank you all so much for watching. If you want to follow me on my social media, I am on Instagram and Twitter at GabbyYABooks with one Y. So that is GABBYABOOKS. My Teen Reads contributor page is linked down below, as well as my Goodreads. So if you want to see book reviews that I'm doing for Teen Reads and you want to know what I'm currently reading, both of those links are in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with a new video. Goodbye!
Broadway, here I come.